You've heard the term customer differently, right? Not customer development, but customer you have heard, right? Have you? Okay. So what do you think about customers? Who give you money? They buy your product. Okay. What else? They use the product or the service that you sell to them. They pay you money. They buy your product or service. Okay. You add value to them. Okay. And how do you develop them? They decide to buy. They decide to pay you money. You add value to them. How do you develop them? Create demand. You create demand? No? Who creates demand? By solving their problem, what are you doing? Developing them. Are you developing them really? No. So what are we doing when we say customer development? What does it really mean? It's very simple. The words are very simple words, right? Okay. Starting small and iterating to big. Okay. And that's how you develop your customers. When you say you start small, do you mean you start with few customers, you iterate and create more customers? That's customer development. Okay. How is it different from generating demand? You are generating more demand for your product, right? Is that how you develop customers? That's what you said. We develop more demand and we have more customers, and that's customer development. Yeah. What's wrong with that? Yes. At the end of the day, we are all here to make money. And if we don't have customers, we don't have more customers, then we don't have a business, right? Customers are what we exist for. So how do we develop them? It's not really like developing a child. It's not really like developing, a theory. This is really something very different, fundamentally different from, the word development that we normally use with anything else, right? And this term customer development itself, have you read any of your books? Any of Steve Blank's books? Steve Blank has written some books. The book that we borrow a lot when we teach Lean Startup is the Startup Owner's Manual. So he wrote a book called the Startup Owner's Manual, and even before that he wrote a book called 4 Steps to Epiphany. And that's, that was based on how he saw startups, going from, 0 to 1. And also, the customer development, he created the framework for customer development. And he used the Lean Startup principles created by Eric Ries. I'm sure you would have heard about Eric Ries and Lean Startup, which is largely, based on agile development. And he also used the business model canvas that was created by Alexander Osterwalder. Both of them happen to be either Steve Blank students or mentees. And he created this framework called customer development, which uses these tools and which uses some of the principles. But the framework is very useful for startups. And the reason why this framework came into place was a time, it's not very old. This is not something that's been there for the last 25 years or 30 years. This has been there only for the last, I would say, 6-7 years, or maybe slightly older than that. And this came about only because when, when investors and funders stopped funding for ideas. There was a time when you could just go and pitch an idea and you will get funded, right? Those days are gone. Funding is not easy. I'm sure you know better than anybody else because you've been, running your own startup and you've created a startup yourself. You know how difficult funding is. And so that's really when he thought about why startups should, and if they didn't have money, and what happens to a startup when it does not have money, when they are just about to create their product or when they are just about to go to market. the lean startup principles was used, and a lot of startups have benefited. But what he also wants people is, this is not necessarily a guaranteed success. If you use lean startup, if you used the framework, there is no guarantee that a startup can be successful. What it really does is it de-risks you from going to market with something that people do not really want. That's really where this framework is very useful. It actually saves a lot of pain for the startups, because startups' resources are limited. We don't have abundant resources. We start with limited resources, not just in terms of money, but even in terms of people, in terms of facilities. So how do we put our resources to best use and make sure that we don't burn all of them even before we go to the market, or as soon as we go to the market we run out of money and then we have to look for more money. And funding is not easy when you are at that stage. Funding is easier as you get more customers. Typically, funders will ask for revenue. Are you in revenue? Have you started billing your customers? Do you have paying customers? How many paying customers do you have? So these are all typical, questions that funders will ask, and because they also want to de-risk their investment. There was a time, like I said, when people were quite, generous with their money. Investors were funding ideas, not necessarily startups which have got really, which have got product and which have got customers. That has changed, and this framework therefore has been useful. And this framework also has been adopted by the National Science Foundation in the US. So any startup that requires or that is applying for SBIR and STTR funding in the US will have to go through the program that Steve Blank has created, and NSF is running it in different nodes in the US. And we run a similar program in IIT Madras, in India, centered at IIT Madras, but we run this program in different IITs and IISc as well. We call this the Incubate program. So a lot of what we are going to talk about today are going to be on the principles of lean startup, essentially about customer development. And we will also, I actually looked at the profile of the startups here. Many of you are at the POC stage, at the product development stage, and I think at least 5, 6 of you are already in the market, right? How many of you are in the market already? You are in revenue? Yeah, so some of you are already in the market and now you are looking at scaling up. And the others are at the product development prototype stage, POC stage, right? You're doing POCs and pilots. None of you are still at the early stages, very early stages of even thinking about the idea, right? Is there anyone who is at the idea stage and just about to start even prototype development? You are, okay, all right. But majority in this room, since we are either in the market already or we are at the POC stage, let's look at those aspects of customer development which are useful for you. But I can't really start talking about customer development without talking about how a startup starts, right? So we will quickly go through that. If any of you have already, if you're familiar with the business model canvas, how many of you are familiar with the business model canvas? Okay. I was expecting a lot more, many more people to have already used business model canvas or familiar with business model canvas. This is good news for me because I can talk about business model canvas. All right. So I love to talk about that. How many of you find this familiar? Is this familiar? Is there anyone in this room who believes that your idea is not disruptive? Anyone believe that your idea is not disruptive? All of you have disruptive ideas, right? So typically this is how startups start, right? We start with an idea, and I'm not saying this to criticize anyone. This is how everybody starts. So if I did a, if I started a startup, this is how I would start as well, because I have conviction about my idea. I truly believe that my idea is going to change the world. I truly believe that people are waiting for my product to come into this world. And therefore, I believe that my idea is disruptive. So if I don't have conviction about my idea, and I will not have the energy to even think about starting up. So that is fine. But this is how we start usually, right? And then we put together a plan. How many of you have a plan? I would expect everybody to have a plan, right? All of you have a plan, right? What plans do you have? What's your plan? Milestone for the next 6 months. Okay. Anybody who's got a 3-year plan? 2 years plan? Yearly plan? So what does your yearly plan say?
Generation of revenue, selling of units, number of units. Is that
So your plan for the next 12 months to sell X number of units. That's your plan.
not just that, maintaining customer relations. There are other objectives.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Okay. You can use the mic. No, please use the mic so that others can hear. It's on, I think. No? Can everyone hear when he speaks? Okay, fine. So just
So that's like the X number of units is the plan in the coming year. So it's not just that. There are other objectives like maintaining customer relations for us as business. Like lead is like there are different objectives like and finding new sector market research is going on. So we are trying to find new sectors.
right.
So all these are outside.
So they're all in your plan, right? Okay. That's fine. That's typical. You're thinking about the future. That's why it's called a plan. And you're thinking about how many units you would like to sell, which new markets you would like to go to, how many leads can I generate, how do I, maintain relationships with my existing customers, how do I acquire new customers. They're all part of your plan. But you have a plan, right? Everybody here has some plan, right? So a startup, even before they go to market, they obviously have a plan. And many cases, even before the product is developed, they have a plan, because that's how I can see the future, right? And some companies or some startups actually spend a lot of time doing business plans. I don't know about you, but there are some startups who spend a lot of time doing business plans because they believe that investors will look for a solid business plan. I don't know what's a solid business plan, but that's what they think, right? And therefore, they spend a lot of time developing business plans. And then, of course, however small or big the organization is, a startup would like to have people doing something which will all come together and create the product that can be taken to the market. So probably typically startups think about product development, the technology team, the technology people, probably the marketing people, if at all. Mostly they are also ignored. It's all about product initially. But a startup thinks about organizing themselves, however small they are. They think about organizing themselves, and they believe that they should be functionally organized. So this person will look after sales and marketing. This person will look after technology. This person will look after, something else. So that's how they think about building a startup. And this is quite common. Don't you dream about creating the perfect product this world will benefit from? Yes or no? You want to pack your product with the best, right? The features that you can offer to your customers. So you spend a lot of time, startups spend a lot of time building the product. In fact, if I asked people in this room, how long have you been running your startup? Which one is the newest startup in this room? Less than 6 months old, anyone here? Yes. Okay. Anyone more than 3 years? Okay. Right. So we have a range. less than 6 months to more than 3 years. When you started, right, probably till about 2 years ago, where were you spending most of your time in your startup?
Trying to figure out what works best in the market and creating few variants of appliances and doing a pilot.
Right. So what works in the market, you were trying to find out what works in the market by creating some variants and piloting them in the market, right? Okay. Where are you spending most of your time, less than 6 months old?
So we are at the product development stage right now. So we are spending in deciding what component to use in the product.
Typical, right? So that's how you start. You start by spending time on product development. Probably spend a lot of time. A lot of companies spend even 3 years, 5 years in product development, because that's really what we are making. How can we not spend time on that and spend time on everything else? Let's first get the product right. Let's first make sure that whatever customers want, we have it in our product. Let's build all the features. And that's how we think about product development, and that's really where we spend a lot of time. So our, while we have a plan and we have a team, largely the company or the startup is focused on getting the product right, or getting the product working, or getting the product perfect, right? Finally, when actually you go to the market, this is what happens. We've done all the right things. We've come up with a brilliant idea. We put together a plan. We've had some great people in the team. We've developed a wonderful product, maybe even a perfect product. But then when you go to market, this is what happens. And data tells us that this is what happens to, the number is debatable, but it's nothing less than 85%. Some people even say that it's more than 90%. But 85 to 90% of the startups, when they go to the market, this is what happens. In India, 50% of the startups do not survive beyond 6 months. That's the statistic. This is what happens, and a lot of people have tried to figure out, why does this happen? Why do you think this happens, according to you? Is it because you built a bad product? No? Then what happens? Not focusing on the customer side. Okay, what do you mean by not focusing on the customer side? You obviously would have thought about customers. It's not like you wouldn't have thought about customers, right? So initially we think about customers, then we think about the product, and then we get so preoccupied with the product that the customer is in the background and product development is the focus, right? And that could be the reason why this happens. That could be a reason. What else do you think could be the reasons? Sorry?
People are skeptic when a new product comes into the market.
So we need to blame the customers. They are skeptics.
Saying that it's obvious, because even if someone is coming with a new product,
Come on. Okay, fine. So people don't trust anything new that easily. And that could be one of the reasons why. And you are developing something new. And therefore customers are skeptical. They don't easily buy anything new. That could be a reason. Okay, fine. What else? Focusing on too many customer segments. How will that make this happen? In fact, you've thought more about customers.
So value proposition might not be like you try to include a lot of value in the product, right? Maybe the customer segment.
So you want to make the product useful for several segments, and accordingly you build your product. So you pack your product with a lot of benefits for variety of customers. That could probably delay you from going to the market. But why would you not succeed in the market if you have thought so much about the customers and what is valuable for them? Cost? You mean the price of the product? Okay, the price of the product could be a barrier. Fine. Sorry, customer? The problem, okay, timing. Timing could be a reason, right? Sometimes we could be too early to the market. People may not appreciate it, they are skeptics anyway. Or sometimes we may be too late to the market, right? Okay.
Priced it way too high,
We priced it way too high, like he said, and that's not acceptable.
and you made a prototype which can't probably be manufactured upscale.
That could be a reason, right? So you made a prototype, but the product does not scale or lend itself to scale. There are challenges. And that could be a challenge for many startups. In fact, that is the number one challenge for startups which have gone past customer discovery. You know, scaling up their production is not easy. You can make 10 units, but if you have to make 10,000 units, it has its own challenges, yes. But that could be contributing to making your business successful, but it is not something that will, you know, make you crash when you go to the market. You don't fall. Because you have some early success with, that's why you want to scale your production anyway. You have some early success. The value propositions have not been met, and there we need to have clarity about value propositions. Typically, you know, how do we think about value propositions? What do we think value propositions mean? You misunderstand the customer, or you miscommunicate with the customer.
Or you only talk to very small customer, less group of customers.
So that's still, you know, better than not speaking to any customer. Because a lot of us imagine about customers and then we decide, right? So that could be a risk. But value propositions, you know, how do we think about value propositions? What do we think value propositions are? Okay. So customers, let's say there is a problem for the customer, they're already getting it solved somehow, right? Or do you believe that they do not have a solution for the problem and your solution is the only solution for their problem?
So they have a problem, so they're trying to do something to solve that particular problem, but that's not, they might be still gaining money on getting it.
Okay, fine,
Better way of doing it.
sure, okay.
Maybe the solution they are getting at very high cost.
The solution that but when you are designing the value proposition, how do you think about it? So later when you take it to the customer finds it expensive, or the customer says, no, it's not solving my problem, I thought about it differently, it's still not solving my problem, all that happens. But when you are thinking about value propositions and designing them, when you are designing your solution, how do you think about value propositions? How much value we add to the customer? Okay?
Product, so what they gain from it.
What they gain from it, and how will you find that out?
Talking to
By talking to the customers. How many of you have spoken to customers? When? Over a period of time. How many of you have spoken to the customer before you developed your prototype? Before you developed your prototype. Great. So how did you find that, you know, experience, speaking to customers even before you developed the prototype, and what did you speak to them about?
Sometimes they want overall information, trying to supply a product and want some support on
So you talk about your idea or the product that you have in mind, though you don't have a product, and then you get feedback from customers about what they think, right? Okay, fine. Still, it's useful to have that conversation. Yeah.
A typical example of a milk chiller. When I went and spoke to him, he had two issues. One was it was not cooling down in the time that he wanted. Second, he's spending a lot of energy and it adds to his operational cost. So he has two objectives that he wants to improvise on, and he has a target value. Can you reduce something, both of these by 20%? And then next comes, okay, what is my payback period for the differential cost?
That's good. So that conversation helped you understand his pains or the problems that he's trying to solve, right? He wants to solve it, he's trying to solve it.
In comparison to the existing product.
Sure. Right, right. But value propositions are not, what we usually think are. It's not what our product can do. Like you said, it's what benefits that the customers can get by using what we give them or what we sell to them, right? And if we can understand what benefits that they are looking for even before we develop the product, the chances of this happening will be much less, right? So that's really where the customer development framework helps. So because this happens to most of the startups, because this happens to 80 to 90% of the startups, the framework is very useful. Of course, this is the number one reason why actually data tells you that this is the number one reason why startups fail, and all of us can easily guess that this could be the number one reason, and this is the number one reason even now. This is not old data, and this is not just US data. The data is the same across the world. Even in India, it's more or less the same. So this is a question that we don't ask ourselves. How many of you have asked this question to yourself? When you are so much in love with your idea, when you believe so strongly about your idea and how disruptive is it, would you actually honestly stop and ask yourself this question? Will you? We have to, but we don't usually, right? Because we are very, very convinced that what we are doing is really going to create, it's a breakthrough and it will create a lot of benefits and value for the customer. Therefore, we don't stop to think or ask this question to ourselves, right? And that's really when things start actually going wrong. The things don't start going wrong when you go to the market. It's not that customers find it expensive. If you trace it all the way back, here is where the root of the problem is. And because we have the conviction, we go ahead, we spend money, we invest our time, we even, many of us, sacrifice the jobs that we could be getting or already in, and then we end up spending time, resources, everything, and then finally when we go to the market we get disappointed. But this question is not something that we ask early enough, right? That's the truth. So this framework is called the Customer Development Framework. Some of you may have seen it, many of you may not have seen it. The framework, if you look at, is the idea, the journey is from the idea to revenue, right? This is the startup's journey. This is not a large company's journey. So when you are a startup, you start with an idea, and the framework that you see inside, especially the first two, customer discovery and customer validation, that's the phase where startups can find a lot of value and use. Customer discovery, we'll see what is customer discovery. So today we will be focusing on customer discovery and validation. If any of you believe that you are already, you have already gone past customer validation and you are at a customer creation stage, you need to ask yourself that question again, because if you were truly in that stage, you will not be in an incubator. You would have already left the incubator. You would have graduated from the incubator. So all of you are in the first two stages. We'll see why I am saying this later, but all of you are either in discovery or in the validation phase. We'll see what is discovery. You then decide which stage you are in, whether you are in the validation stage or you're in the discovery stage. I'm not passing judgments here, but I can only say that you cannot be at the customer creation or company building stage, because if that is the case, you would already be outside the incubator. You will not be here. But within the first, the search phase, I'm not judging where you are. You decide for yourself and see how this framework can be useful for you. Okay? If we don't, what we say is a business plan is good, but a business plan is not very useful when you are thinking about an idea, and when you are in that search phase, a business plan is not very useful. Why do I say that? And in the search phase, what we are doing is we've thought about an idea, we are looking at developing our product, and we are looking at making something useful for customers so that they will buy, and we want a lot of customers to buy it. We are testing our product first in the lab and then in the market. We are doing all of this in the first two phases. That's really where you spend your time in incubators and even sometimes in accelerators if you are in the validation phase. But we are spending all our time there. And if that's where we are spending our time, how useful is a business plan? What is a business plan really? The business plan is actually, it has got lot of things in it. Business plan will also have assumptions, but the business plan is trying to project the future, right? So a company, a large company, if you look at, let us say, any big company, an automobile manufacturer makes a business plan for the next 5 years, and that company has been in business for the last 50 years. How do you think they will be making their business plan for the next 5 years? These days, 5 years is a very long time. The time has actually, shrunk. People used to talk about 10-year business plans, but now you can't talk about 10-year business plans because there's so much uncertainty, right? You cannot really make a 10-year business plan. But even if you have a 3-year business plan, how do you think they will be making that business plan? A company that's been in business for 50 years, thinking about the next 3 years. What do you think they will be doing? What products they may be releasing in the next 3 years? They look at where they are currently, how profitable are they, which product lines are already profitable, what is their mix of customers, if they have different products for different segments of customers, which one is more profitable. They already have a lot of data, and they are projecting the future based on the data that they have, and also thinking about new products that I may launch, how will I price them, will there be demand, I'll be forecasting the demand, and so on, because 1, I have past data, 2, I have trends, and based on all of that, I am making a projection for the future. But a startup does not have any of that. Do you have data like a 50-year-old company? Can you make projections based on your past? No. You're simply projecting into the future, right? You can probably look at the industry data. Suppose you are, in a certain industry. You can look at the other players in the industry and look at the size of the industry. And that can give you some idea about whether the business is worth doing or not. But it does not give you any information about how much business you can be doing in the next 3 years. You don't have data to actually project your future on, right? So the plan is not as much useful as a model. So instead of a business plan, this framework suggests that you do a business model. How many of you have seen the business model canvas? Very few. Many, okay. How many of you have actually used it for your business? Yes? That's it, right? So what is your experience of doing a business model canvas and using it for your business and not just doing it?
So we are able to understand the value proposition correctly.
Okay.
How this will benefit and over customer segment. That is the major advantage we get when you are working.
So when you're working with a tool like a business model canvas, this is a fantastic tool. This tool was developed by Alexander Osterwalder, and this is very much part of the framework, the lean startup framework, and it actually helps you get clarity about, like he said, more than anything else, to begin with, get clarity about who could be your potential customers and why will they buy your product. Isn't that the most fundamental question for any business? The first question that any business needs to answer is this: It's not the product specs, it's not the product size, it's not the product price. It is who will buy my product and why. That's the fundamental question. So the tool actually makes you think about things that you usually don't think about. It makes you ask questions to yourself that you don't usually ask. So therefore this tool is very useful. So instead of a business plan, this framework recommends that you start with a business model. If you can see, there are 9 building blocks in the business model canvas, right? And you don't read it left to right, neither do you read it right to left, right? You start with like he said, the customer segments and the value proposition. Look at those 2 blocks. Those are the 2 blocks that you first work with. Get clarity about those, who needs my product and why do they need it? What is the benefit that they will get by using my product? Once we have clarity about that, then we start thinking about other things that you see on the business model canvas, the other 7 blocks. All these blocks are connected. None of them can be looked at in isolation. You cannot think about value proposition without thinking about customer segments. You cannot think about customer segments without thinking about value propositions, right? So that's how tightly linked they are. But it's not just these 2. All 9 are very, very tightly linked. You cannot really look at anything in isolation. We'll see, we'll very quickly go through the business model canvas. Thankfully, not all of you have used it, so I can still talk about it. Okay, the 3 fundamental questions. The first question that any startup, how many of you can say confidently that you have the answer to this question? Very good. So at least about 15% of the room have got the answer. What about the remaining? Are you still searching for the answer? Are you asking the question? And how are you finding the answer? This is fundamental. Do we agree? This is the most fundamental question. There are only 3 questions that we need to answer. The first question, which is most fundamental, is who needs it and why? So we can discuss this here. So you got the answer to this question? You're still searching, right? Okay, what's your product? Who's your customer?
We have developing turbine generator for engines.
Okay.
The customer segments, there are many customer segments. One would be the OEMs, and the other would be the existing vehicles which were at.
So who do you think will be your early adopters?
So after all that, building your OEMs are not.
OEMs are not your customers. So you're clear now that they are not your customers. They are not the early adopters. Okay. So who do you think your customers are and why do they need it?
Well, we can save a lot of fuel cost and have a better, I would say, uptime and lesser downtime for the vehicle.
So this is how we think about customers and this is how we think about the answer. Why do they need it? Right? We think that these customers need it because they will get ABC benefits. They will be able to reduce their costs, they will be able to get better output or better production capacity, so on and so on and so on. That's how we think about it. And there is nothing wrong, but will you still get the answer if you are thinking about it inside this room? That's the question, right? So how do we find out? How do we get the answer to this question? How many of you would like to go ahead with your startup even if you don't have answer to this question? How many of you are already going ahead with your startup without finding the answer to this question? You? Let's be honest. Do we agree that this is fundamental? We need to find the answer to this question. But we are still willing to go ahead without finding the answer to this question. Why?
Why do we do this? Are we crazy people? Are we mad? Or do we have a lot of money to throw?
Probably it solves your own personal problem.
It solves our own personal problems, right? Going beyond and without finding the answer to this question solves our own personal problems.
Do you find that particular problem either fascinating or passionate or it solves?
So I have personal experience. It solves my problem. Therefore, I believe that the world will also.
Maybe adopt it later.
Right. So that's how we think about it, right? But do we still have the answer? We don't have the answer. I'm guessing that because I find it useful, million other people or many millions of people will find it useful. I'm making an assumption. It's not an answer, right? But can we actually find out the answer? Do you think it's possible before you go to market, can you find the answer to this question? Not possible? Possible. Of course it's possible. You're not going to talk to, 1.3 billion people in the country, but you will still be able to get the answers. And that's what this framework helps you get. So the very first question that the framework and the business model canvas helps you find an answer to is this question: who needs it and why? Right? The second, what happened? The second question is, can you deliver that value? This is really where we have challenges. We found the answer, but can I actually deliver it? I can deliver it to 10 people, but can I deliver it to 10 million people? Can I do it efficiently? Can I do it so efficiently that it still makes my business viable? We don't have answers to those questions. But no point in finding the answer to this question without finding the answer to the first question. Because imagine if you didn't have the answer to the first question, just think about it for 2 minutes and see if you can find the answer to the second question. Can you? Logically, it's not possible. If you don't know what problem you are solving, who you are solving it for, how can you think about delivering the value to that person? Right? But that's the second. So when a startup is coming out of the customer discovery stage and then when it is moving into a validation stage, that's really when this question can be asked. This is important. We are not doing charity. We are doing business. And we want to make enough money, not just money. And what do we mean when we say we want to make enough money? Yeah, it's not the quantum of money. It is, am I making enough money that I can even sustain? Am I making more money than I am spending, or I am spending more than I am making? Then it's not viable. The business is not viable, right? So for your business to be viable, you should be making enough money. You should not be bleeding. And even if you are bleeding in the beginning, you will also know when you will stop bleeding and when you will start actually becoming profitable, your business will become viable. At what scale will it become viable? And you will start chasing that scale. But these are the three fundamental questions any startup needs to answer, or anything, any new idea that anybody has, any innovation. These are the three questions that we need to answer. Is there a fourth question? Can you think of any other questions that are so fundamental and important? Sorry?
Will it sustain the market continuously?
Will it sustain in the market continuously? So that's a question that you will ask when you are already an established company. When you are a startup. Sorry? Can we solve the problem? That gets covered in that. Can you deliver that value? What more innovations can you do? And when will you ask that question? After these three or before these three? So when you are a startup, your only aim is to go to market, isn't it? Do you have any other aims? Are you applying for patents and that's your only aim when you are doing a startup? Then you are doing research. But when you are a startup, what do you think is your at least first milestone? The most important milestone when you are a startup? Getting a paying customer.
right? Which is what we say, go to market or whatever. Getting a paying customer is extremely important. That's the first milestone, right? And then what? What do we then think about? We are still a startup. Just because we've got the first paying customer, it does not mean that we have become a large company. We are still a startup. Then what do we think about? Finding more customers. That's what we then think about. And then what do we think about? We are still not a large company. We are still a startup. Then what do we think about? Sorry, more segments, right? So there is a point that you will reach when you will believe that you are ready to scale your company. Scaling happens in two aspects. One is you are scaling your production. You start making more of what you are making, or making varieties of what you are making because there is a demand. But what is also important is you need to scale the organization. You cannot have a 50 people organization running a very large business that requires 5,000 people. But you don't want to start hiring 5,000 people. You don't even have the money to hire 5,000 people. You don't even have the money to have 50 people. You probably start with 5 people. But scaling the organization and scaling your capacity to deliver value to customers both go hand in hand. You cannot look at one in isolation from the other. That's really when you start scaling. But till the time you reach that point, these questions are critical. Otherwise, you don't even start. If you're not making enough money, suppose you have the first paying customer, you have 50 paying customers, but you are suffering from the last point. What will you do? You're not making enough. What will you do? Sorry? Different segment. But for you to even think about tomorrow, you need more money because you are already losing money. You will try to add more value, but for that you need money. Somebody has to fund you. And that's when actually a lot of startups have struggled. You can do more marketing, but that needs more money. So you need investments, right? Getting investments is very difficult. All of you know that. Getting funding is not easy. And at different stages, it becomes differently difficult, but never easy. When you don't have the answer to the first question, getting funding is almost impossible. You are spending your own money. Right? When you have the first customer and when you are finding answers to you are doing pilots, you are in the second question probably. Probably you can ask friends and family some money. If you are lucky, you will get some grants and that may actually spoil you, or you may get some money from individual investors. But you don't have big money even at this point in time. And then as you go, you will need lot more money. So the stage where, we've got 50 paying customers. I need lot more money to even survive. I need probably, 10 times the money that I needed earlier when I had only 5 customers. So that's really when things start becoming challenging. But the first challenge is this. Getting to that point itself is a challenge. Then we will think about the next challenge. Right? How many of you believe that you have answered all these 3 questions and you are beyond this now? No. You are?
I heard about the second point. So it's all depends upon the customer size, right? So can you deliver that value? So I may be able to deliver to 1 or 2%, but
Exactly. So what assumptions are you making about your market size? Because you're not building a business to serve 5 customers. Yeah, even as a startup, because there is potential in the market, will you build a business which has a market size of only 50 customers?
I won't, but I like to study well with that 50 customers.
Correct. So you will build a business only because the market size is big enough. There are enough number of customers who got the problem, who are willing to pay money to get the problem solved, which is why you are even betting on your business. Obviously, you won't solve everybody's problem when you are a startup or when you are in the first 6 months of business. So you will have the first customer, you will have the second customer, you will have 10 customers. But can you deliver that value even to those 10 customers? And if 10 becomes 100, can you deliver that value? So this question is iterative. All these three questions are not only once answered. If you are trying to get into a new segment, you will ask the same question, the first question again. Right? So you will have to go through iterations. It's not a linear path. It's not a straight line. You said 1, 2, 3 and then I am on. You will keep coming back to this question. And you decide when you want to ask the question again and again. You have the liberty to do it. Please iterate. But without finding the answer for the first question, even as you begin, if you went ahead, you developed a product, what do you think is going to happen? I'm not saying, you will fail, but what do you think will happen? What will be the struggle? Selling it could be a struggle. Finding who will really want it could be a struggle, even if it is a fantastic product. I assume that these are the people who will need my product, but when I try to go and sell it to them, they are not buying it. So these struggles will happen and then we will learn. It's not like any startup who has not asked these questions in the beginning are doomed to fail. A lot of startups have been lucky, right? But do you want to bet on luck or do you want to bet on the clarity, answering these questions and taking deliberate action? What do you want to bet on? I can bet on luck if I have a lot of money. But how much money do you think I can have as a startup? Right? So I am de-risking by asking these questions early enough, and the framework helps me ask these questions, ask relevant questions to the right people, and then find the answers. That's what this framework is all about. Any questions so far? Yeah.
When we are at ideation stage, that is the first question, who needs it and why? So I thought that this particular section needed, and I thought of solution, this might be solution. Now people talk about validate your idea. How do I validate it? Talking to people, that is the validation, or some other methods are there to validate that?
I don't know if there are other methods of validation. The only method that I know is by talking to customers. How do we?
Do we need a official document?
No, so we are not making a sales pitch, right? I don't need brochures, I don't need documents. In fact, I don't even talk about my idea or product. That's what this framework suggests. That framework says, I'll just show you a video very quickly and then you'll probably understand. It's not a survey, but there is a tool. It's not a survey. The tool is this. The framework and the customer discovery process is what helps you get validation. So in the framework, you saw customer discovery, customer validation when you are in the search phase. And then you have the customer creation and company building, which is scaling, right? We will be in the first two stages. All of us are somewhere in the first two stages now. Even if we have a paying customer, we are probably still in the second stage and have not fully exited the second stage. But how do we validate? We'll see how the framework helps us validate. So first question, who needs it and why? This is an example where this book is actually a good book, made to stick. One of the examples in the book talks about how a company, this is a big company, big brand, this is not a small company, big brand, which was making a lot of consumer products, and they also were making pasta. And they saw that the brand, the pasta product line, the brand was actually, it was not doing well, and in fact it was declining. They couldn't understand why it was declining, because they actually thought they were very innovative. They launched varieties of pasta actually. So like anybody would think about, initially I started with 1 or 2 varieties, but now I have 30 or 50 or even 100 varieties of pasta. So the more varieties that I have, I'm already a company which has a brand, more people should be buying it. But instead of that, they saw their brand actually was declining. Sales was declining, therefore the brand was declining. This went on for a few years, and finally they said we have to do something about it. And then they got some new people, fresh people, and then they sent them to the homes where pasta is being cooked. They went and observed mothers cooking pasta, and they come back, and what they reported was actually, quite interesting and different from what the company had thought. They came back, they understood that what the company had assumed, that the customer that they were, making their pastas for are the children, the kids at home. And because they love variety, they make different varieties of pasta, because children will get bored very easily if they ate the same pasta every day, so it is appealing to them. What they really found was the customer was not the children, the customer was the mom. The mother was making the decision about the pasta that she wanted to buy and cook. And what they understood was they were not looking for variety, they were looking for consistency and quality. In fact, the mothers had a problem going into a store and looking at 30 varieties and finding it difficult to choose which one to buy. And they were spending time trying to decide which one to buy. It was too much of a headache for them. And the children were also, looking at different varieties. In fact, it was actually aggravating the problem but not solving the problem. So what they were really looking for was consistency, simple purchasing process. That's all. So the company actually then discarded the variety and they went back to, I think, 2 or 3 varieties. So that's an example. So what happened here? The assumption that the company had made about who their customer was, there was something fundamentally wrong. Right? And then the value proposition. The variety they thought is the value proposition. The customer segment they thought were the children. But what really happened was, variety was not the value proposition, consistency was the value proposition that the customer was looking for. So how could you have validated this if you didn't go and spend time with moms in their kitchens? You couldn't have. They would have never figured this out. Right? So who needs it and why? That question is the fundamental question. We may have some assumptions about who needs it. We may think that this is my customer, but you will be surprised to find that they are not your customers. Somebody else is your customer. But learn that early enough. Find the answer early enough. And why do they need it? Do they need it for variety or do they need it for consistency? You will not get the answer if you don't go out and find out. If they sat in their building, that's what they did for so many years. Some geniuses came with the idea that we should launch 100 varieties of pasta because that's what customers are looking for, and they were wrong. And they would have never found out unless they stepped out. Okay? So this is the business model canvas, the 9 blocks that you see here. When we are trying to answer this question, who needs it and why, the 2 blocks that we focus on are these: customer segments and value proposition. Who needs it? Why they need it? What value to whom? Right? All of us will believe that we know the answer already. But what this framework suggests is that make assumptions. You really don't know unless you have validated your assumptions. Make assumptions about who needs it and why they need it. So like the pasta example, they made an assumption that children need it, and they made the assumption that they need it because they love variety. That's why they made variety of pasta. Similarly, you can make assumptions about your business. What assumptions are you making about who needs it and why? Do all of you know? Are all of you making assumptions about who needs it and why? Obviously, you are making those assumptions, which is why you are making your product in the first place. Right? Have you thought about validating it? Or do you believe that you have already validated it? So what you are working with are not assumptions. How many of you can say that you are working with facts and not assumptions? You validated it. Okay, can you tell us how you validated it? But did you start with assumptions or did you start with facts?
100% assumptions.
Okay.
So we were thinking our value proposition. Okay, what we are doing is augmented reality, virtual reality application, so that you can see any product in your live environment, real size, real texture and all that. So this is our product basically. This is the application development. The customer initially what we thought is the real estate or home decor, interior decorations kind of thing, where you will be putting your sofa inside your house and things like that. But when we start discussing the thing and went out and talked to all the customers, then we found they are not having real pain in that one. They are saying, now also I am able to sell this thing. This is not really enough. I have to sit and then only I will buy for many different reasons. But when we went to some customers where big machines kind of thing, they were saying it is very difficult for showcasing the customer the height of the machine and all those stuff. So that for them, they have to carry the machine to their place, then only it can be sold. So during this process, actually we found that machines which are very complex in nature is the real target customer. So they have the difficulty in showcasing something. So how the turbine, how it works and all those stuff, without by talking it cannot be explained to them.
Right.
So if you are showcasing it in real size, in front of them, people will be able to understand it much better. This is how it will be placed. Many different kind of things. So they are able to understand that. And the same concept we changed to industrial training as well. That's also another customer segment. But the same concept is utilized for industrial training. That's also big. Basically that too, same thing, complex machine is the
Right.
area we are trying.
Right. So, did we understand this, example? They started with the assumption that real estate companies are their customers because they could show using their product how a sofa will look if it is placed in the living room, how a bed will look if it is placed in the bedroom, and that will increase their sales. That's the assumption. So, the value proposition was increased sales or increased revenue for real estate companies. Customer segment is real estate companies because they can actually visualize how a sofa and a cupboard and a bed will look inside a home. That's how the whole idea started with that. But now what they are saying is it was not really of value to them. Their sales is not necessarily going to increase because of the use of their product. They figured out. In fact, they said that it's going to be tedious or more cumbersome for me to use this product and then, show people and stuff like that. It's easier for me to sell the way I'm already selling it. I really don't have a problem. Therefore, I don't find your product relevant. But if they had gone ahead with that assumption and if they had completed their product development based on real estate companies as their customer segment and the only customer segment, what do you think would have happened? What do you think will be the answer to this question? We would have found out much later that they are not the one who need it. They are not the ones who need it, and they don't need it for the reason that I thought they need it. We would have found the answer much later, but through this process probably they were able to find the answer much earlier. Instead of this segment, they found another segment where there is a real pain. Companies which are selling large machineries are not able to get their customers to visualize the height and the size, and so people were finding it much more useful to use this product for heavy machinery rather than for furniture. The value proposition is also different, right? And that is what the value of customer discovery is. You find it early enough. Any questions about this? Do you want to ask me or ask him? Yes.
In this case, actually, this customer also making an assumption, right?
Customer is making an assumption about?
That it may be painful, it may be not helpful for people to sell.
The customer is allowed to make assumptions because he is the one who's paying.
So what about the opportunity of what about thinking to prove the customer that it
Sure, you can prove the customer wrong. Right? If that is the purpose of your startup, please do it. But your purpose of a startup is not to prove the customer wrong. It is to do what they want. If they don't have the need and you prove them that they did not know that they have the need, it's a longer process. Which is a shorter process for you? To give them what they want or to prove them wrong?
give something what they want?
Absolutely. Maybe later, when they actually start seeing this being used, they will get their own ideas. But right now, this customer segment does not have a pain. There's no point in forcing them to buy my product. It's a more difficult process. That's all. You may be right, the customer does not know, but the customer will know when he knows. When there is enough pain, customers will buy. Any other question? Yeah.
So you said that you have to find the fact about what they need or not. So can you give us some data analytics people or is it the right way to do it?
So this framework suggests that you don't do any of that. You know enough about the industry, there is a lot of secondary research data available. So if you are trying to make a new brand of biscuits, there is enough information available about the industry, how many companies are making biscuits, what type of biscuits are they making, what prices are they selling at, which geographies are they selling at, which one of their product lines is selling more than the others, who's the number one, right? You have lot of information available. So yes, please use that information. But all of this is not going to give you any validation that they need your biscuit. You'll have to take a chance, right? Or you find out what will make people who are currently buying X brand of biscuit switching to your brand of biscuits. Find out so that you can make your product accordingly. But that cannot be done through surveys. That cannot be done through data analytics. That can be done only by simple conversations. You have to keep speaking and having conversations without trying to prove them wrong. Right? And it is possible. This is, this is not something that, it's not theory. This is how, the framework actually helps you turn your guesses or assumptions into facts. Is there a guarantee then that your startup will be successful? Still no. But you are better off than not knowing what customers want. That's all.
Now, we are asking the customers what their pain points. But can we do this for the customer? Can we ask their customers also? And can we build the how to we can ask this? The same thing, can we ask customers?
Yes. Suppose you are in a B2B model, right? Any B2B business model, if you are building something that is B2B, you cannot answer this question successfully if you don't understand your customer's business model. Suppose your customer is an organization which is in turn selling to consumers, let us say. You need to find out their business model, only then you will be able to understand their pains. Otherwise, you will not be able to. If it's a direct to consumer kind of a business, then you can talk to the users mainly and then understand their pains. But if you are serving businesses which serve consumers, you need to understand their business model, whom they are serving and what are their pains also. Definitely yes. Am I with you or am I losing you? This framework is supposed to be simple, but if I am complicating it for you, please stop me right here. Anything that is not okay? I don't want to, just present here. That's not the purpose of me being here today. I want to have conversations. If you want to. Right. Okay, so we'll see. So this is how we start. If we need to find the answer to the question, these are the two blocks in the business model canvas that we look at and we validate our assumptions, right?